We think that having the seabird colony in the centre of a city is fantastic, but the birds are quite noisy and they do create a mess, which are the two main problems. So particularly there are some hotels down there have problems with the birds keeping their guests awake very early in the morning with their calls, and also some of the businesses and residents around there have problems with the droppings from the birds going on them. So as a result of that, there is pressure from businesses to move the bird off of the bridge, even though the birds were there first. So they have got some of the other businesses and some of the organisations down there agitated to sort of try and get the birds off, and that's caused something of a conflict down there. What the hotel wanted to do was to install bird deterrent devices on 3 sides of the north abutment. So that would involve, in some cases, where there's a ledge, they would have put a slope on it to prevent the birds from getting on the ledge. In other cases, they were going to fit sort of an electrocuting type device to sort of provide an electrical shock to the birds when they landed. And I think in other cases, they were going to put spikes on. So that was going to be on 3 sides of the building, which would have displaced about 150 pairs, something like that, of kittiwakes, which are nesting on there.
The kittiwakes first started nesting on the River Tyne in 1949. That's when they were first noted nesting at North Shields. And up until 1960, they only nested in the river mouth and in the North Shields area. In 1964, the first kittiwakes nested at Gateshead on a sheet metal works. And in the early 1970s, there were nesting pairs on 2 flour mills at Gateshead, and one of which was the Baltic Art Centre, or the Baltic Flour Mill as it then was. We don't quite know why the birds initially took to nesting on the Tyne, but it must be a bit safer for the birds to nest on the river, because they're not subjected then to the storms if they nest on sea cliffs out at sea, for example on the Farne Islands. In poor weather, nests can be washed away. So they must have a bit more security in where they're nesting on the Tyne.
The black-legged kittiwake, they've been put on the red list of species in the UK, and that's a list of bird species which are of sort of the highest conservation concern. And because of that, every breeding colony of kittiwakes is important to the success of the UK.
One reason to protect them is that actually they're a bird which its population is in decline and is doing very well in this location, so we probably ought to be encouraging them, not discouraging them. So it's quite a significant population in terms of conservation terms, but it's also, you know, they normally nest on fairly remote sea cliffs. It's unique that they nest 10 miles inland anywhere in the world, and you know, it's also quite uncommon for them to nest on buildings, so it's quite a unique thing, and they bring something different to Newcastle city centre. There's no other city centre that's got a seabird colony in the middle of it. You know, a lot of people like to go there and watch the birds and photograph them, and they, you know, and actually one resident said to me, someone who lives down there, because the birds are only there from March until August, and they said, you know, when the birds have gone at the end of the season, the place seems empty without them, you know, so they provide character, and you know, a lot of people love to see them.
As each building is putting up spikes, netting, electric sort of deterrents of birds, the birds are actually just moving to other buildings which don't have it. So it's sort of displacing the problem around the quayside area, and that can in turn be creating a little bit more conflict within the area. However, obviously there's only a finite number of areas to nest. And so if a lot were put up along the bridge, for example, and in other areas, other buildings surrounding the area, there is a possibility that there won't be areas for the birds to nest, and as such they could fail to nest in that year. This could obviously have detrimental effects further afield.
The deterrent measures certainly do work and move the birds to other ledges nearby. But at the moment at Newcastle Quayside, we're running out of new ledges for the birds to move on to. So ideally, if Newcastle City Council and the businesses were prepared to leave the birds on the north abutment, perhaps one measure is a glass canopy could be built around the base of the north abutment to catch the droppings and detritus falling from the nests, and also over the pavement on the riverside there under the Tyne Bridge itself, under the girders where some of the birds nest as well. And that may be one way to alleviate the situation.
Well, I guess it's really important to say the Newcastle and Gateshead Quayside colony is incredibly unique because it is the furthest inland colony of kittiwakes anywhere in the world. So it provides a fantastic place to watch them, and it's an incredibly interesting educational resource to actually have these wild species in the heart of our city, so something that should be protected.
This is not a new conflict, it's been going on for quite a long time, and as a result of that, a lot of different organisations at some time or another have been working on this particular issue. Organisations like the RSPB, the Natural History Society of Northumbria. We'd actually been putting some satellite tags on the birds to track where they went and where they were feeding. The local wildlife trusts had also been involved, and some of the local authorities had sort of had to intervene in this issue. And so we decided to sort of create a Tyne Kittiwakes partnership where we come together twice a year, and it gives us an opportunity to look ahead, work together to help conserve the birds, promote the birds, and to gain a better understanding of their conservation needs as well. So long term we have to find a solution, which is to find another location somewhere where we can create an artificial cliff type habitat and the birds can go there instead of being on the Tyne Bridge. But that's actually very difficult to achieve. That quayside area is a prime real estate economic development area, and so none of the landowners there want to give up their land for kittiwakes, which is what's going to have to happen in order to find them an alternate home. So actually, you know, and also creating a new tower itself is also quite expensive, you know, well over £100,000. So we'll need to find land, we'll need to find money, and we'll also then have to try and persuade the kittiwakes to move. So it's certainly not certain that there is, you know, this will happen, and it's certainly not certain it will happen next year. So, you know, I certainly anticipate a sort of long-running conflict which might take several years to resolve if we can find the money and the land to do that.